The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
The life of comic fandom can be lonely, but just around the corner can be found. A place that lets you know you're not the only nerdy true believer who's around. The comic book store, 'cause that's where the books live, but it's also much more. It's the heart of the art form that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store. Out among the stacks of new releases, browsing with your future new best friends. You're gonna find a book you'll love to pieces. The girl behind the counter recommends dollar books and shelves of graphic novels. Titles old and new, you'll find them all. With action figures, board games, toys, and models to add to your new Comic Wednesday haul. The comic book store, 'cause that's where the books live, but it's also much more. It's the heart of the art form that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store.
Ah, yes, now we're back in the comic book store, and I'm here with my buddy Yuddy Yuddy. Ladies and gentlemen, from Asterisk 51, from your local comic book store near you, it's Evan Bevins live from Twitter. How do you do, sir?
Oh, sorry, Mark. I was on the can.
You're doing a Surrogates impression.
Well, that's pretty fitting, given that we're here to talk about the comic and the movie Surrogates. Am I right?
You are right, Evan Bevins. That is correct. We are talking about the Surrogates, which is a 5-issue comic book limited series written by Robert Venditti, drawn by Brett Weldele, and published by Top Shelf Productions from 2005 to 2006. In 2009, it was followed by the prequel graphic novel, The Surrogates Flesh and Blood Sacrifice. That's a Poison song, by Flesh and Bone. It was then made into a film, Surrogates, starring Bruce Willis, which was directed by Jonathan Mustow and also stars Rhoda Mitchell, Rosamund Pike, and James Cromwell, and Ving Rhames. So we're doing this because we are slowly but surely working our way through all of the independent graphic novels that were made into movies nobody saw. What a niche we've carved out for ourselves here, Evan.
Yeah, I saw this one in the theater.
Did you really? In 2009?
I'm not even sure I realized it was based on a comic at the time.
I find that to be like a thing. These lesser known comic books, they find a second life through the films they are adapted to, because people don't know that they were comic books first. Like, for whatever reason, and maybe you can speak to this as a way of kicking off comic strip today, that Marvel and DC, and maybe there's always like a tertiary publisher, they get all the love, they get all the attention, and you're a comic book store, you're in the business of selling comic books, so you're going to put out there in the forefront the things that are going to sell, Funko Pops and miniatures, then comic books. But but you have all of these, for all of the complaining that happens, and I'm sure you've heard this, for all the complaining that happens about there's not enough differentiation in comic books. Everything's the same. I'm bored with superheroes, this, that, and the other thing. There's plenty of independent books to be had, but there isn't enough of a market demand for them, so they get pushed to the back. So things like the Surrogates, which is quite possibly the best thing I've read that we've covered, and maybe the best thing I've read in a long time, don't get a lot of attention until they get adapted into a major feature, and then you see in big friendly letters the words adapted from the comic book, and everyone goes, oh, and then they go buy the graphic novel, and the publisher wonders, why do we even bother with floppies? I've said a lot, possibly too much, according to my daughter.
Was there a
And
question in there?
not even a little. So, my question to you, Evan Bevins, is can you pick through the morass and soup of things I just dumped in your lap and find something to comment on?
Yes, there are stories in comics other than superheroes, and there have been for a long time. There used to be a bunch of westerns that was really popular in comics, war comics, romance comics. You and me and Jesse Starcher did a source material on Hellcat, and Hellcat started out as Patsy Walker, like teen model or something, as a romance comic in Marvel, and then Stan Lee was like, "Hey, let's do something with Patsy Walker." Things worked out with Captain America, right?
What was the martial arts she was like really, really good in Jessica Jones, and we laughed our ass off about it?
Yeah, that was her. I don't remember what the particular discipline was. I did just learn last year that the same actress that played her in Jessica Jones was the impossibly attractive hacker in Transformers.
Oh, that's right. Yes. I want to keep saying I am a master in flotsam and jetsam, but I know that isn't right. But I would love it if that were an actual martial arts discipline. Like, what are you, some kind of master of kung fu? No, flotsam and jetsam.
That's I think that's the preferred martial art of the Atlantean army.
So you say so had you read the book prior to us deciding to talk about it?
No. Like I said, I knew at some point it was based on a comic, but I don't know that I even realized that when I saw it in the theater. I might have gone to it to review. I can't remember. But yeah, no, I hadn't. And the only thing I knew Robert Venditti, or Didi, however you say it, should have looked that up, from was he did a lot of work for DC. He I think he took over Green Lantern sometime after Jeff Johns left, and he wrote Justice League for a little while, and I believe the Flash, but that was all after this. Everybody, a lot of the career paths are you make your indie darling that get you respected, and then you go and get a paycheck from Marvel or DC.
That's how it always works. You start off in the bush leagues, and then you make good in the bush leagues, and you get discovered by the top agent, and the top agent brings you to the big time.
Yes.
So is this in preparation for this podcast? This is your first reading of the Surrogates?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Have you read much or liked much by Robert Venditti?
I was trying to think. Like I said, I know he did some Green Lantern and some Justice League, and if I'm remembering right, his Justice League came right after this huge epic multi-year story by Scott Snyder that led up into Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths 574. This time we mean it, and so it was kind of in this no man's land where it's like, well, isn't the Justice League supposed to be dead or the world have ended? And Robert Mediti's out here just like doing like, hey, I'm going to tell a superhero story. So I did not delve into that because I had no idea where it fit in the continuity, as if that matters. A good story is a good story. But so, and I'd read some Green Lantern here and there, but not a whole lot. He's a name I knew, but not. It didn't have anything specifically. I'd say my favorite work of his is Surrogates, easily. But
okay, it's funny. As you're talking, I'm looking at some of the Wikipedia stuff on this, and I might have read Robert Venditti stuff. I might not have. I really don't know. The publication history says it ran from 2005 to 2006. Venditti was inspired to write the Surrogates after reading Indra Sinha's book, The Cyber Gypsies, about numerous individuals who lost their spouses or their jobs due to their addiction to the internet and their online personas. In an interview, he said, "It dawned on me that if you were somehow able to create a persona and send it out into the real world, where it could go to work for you and run your errands and so on, then you would never have to go back to being yourself. And yeah, I have a lot to say about that. Critical reception, although it received good reviews, the initial miniseries debuted with low sales numbers. This is what I was alluding to before. The second issue sold less than 2,000 copies and was the 29th best-selling comic book in October of 2005. The book attracted more attention after the film adaptation was announced. So the plot synopsis goes like this. In the year 2054, people live through surrogates, life like androids they control from the safety of home. Society has become sanitized, remote, and heavily reliant on these perfect avatars. Detective Harvey Greer is investigating a series of surrogate-related attacks, including sabotage and destruction. The suspect is a mysterious figure named Steeplejack who rejects surrogate culture and wants people to live authentically. He sounds like my avatar. As Greer digs deeper, he becomes disillusioned with the system and eventually gives up his own surrogate, choosing to reconnect with the world in his flawed human form. So what did you think of the book, Evan?
I really liked it. One of the things that jumped out to me about it, besides just the fact that the themes are, I mean, it does a great job of having themes that are obvious, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it like instantly, as soon as you're reading, you're like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. I can relate to this, and then explores them terrifically. But one thing I liked is there was no like info dump. There was no like the year is 2054. We didn't get a synopsis.
The Decepticons have taken over Cybertron.
Yeah,
literally how the movie starts.
We didn't get that. It was just like, hey, this is going on, and almost everything was revealed through dialogue and naturally. Now there was each issue had some back matter, some articles at the end, and I was like, oh no, is this like Watchmen? But it was really it was really informative, and even that wasn't an info dump like the point-by-point history of surrogacy. It was newspaper articles, magazine articles that like expanded the world. You didn't have to read them to understand the story at all, but it made it really rich and more in depth without ever just saying, okay, in 2037 this happened, in 2038 this happened.
In the trade,
Ooh.
I can do props too.
This really doesn't help the podcast audience.
Thanks, Dick.
I prefer Richard.
In the trade, there's actually supplemental material that speaks to what you're talking about, but in the original floppies, that stuff isn't there, and I absolutely agree with you. It helps the flow of it's good. The difference between writing and good writing is the ability to pepper in the details and world building over the course of the narrative, as opposed to feeding it to you in hard to digest chunks right at the beginning, the middle, and the end for no good reason.
Yeah. No, yeah, I thought that was something that this did very well, aside from the fact that it had a theme. A lot of the stories we've talked about on here, even if we haven't been impressed with the execution of either the comic or the movie or both, we've gone, okay, this is a great idea. The elevator pitch for this is fantastic. And this one is, okay, that's, 40, at that point, 50 years in the future. And, humanity has gone from screen culture to, we don't ever have to interact with each other at all, which is mildly appealing at times. But, then it quickly takes that to the extreme, and it doesn't. There's a lot of stuff in it where it doesn't, just say, oh, well, surrogates are bad, period. It was, okay, here's why we did this. There was an article explaining why surrogates handle law enforcement and this, that, and the other. And, in the movie and the book, there's a character who's very important who developed surrogates because he had, a severe, I don't know if they ever said what it was, but he couldn't walk. He could barely communicate with people. So it's like, okay, here's someone this would actually help. And in a total departure from real life, humanity took technology that was useful and used it for shallow and selfish means.
Since the dawn of the internet, we've had the slowly encroaching avatar. whether it was, a AOL screen name. What was your AOL screen name? Mine was Dude Muda.
I didn't. I never was on. Never had an AOL.
Okay.
I don't think. My a lot of my usernames and emails are RNMKR47,
Mhm.
which I had just read The Rainmaker when I got my first computer with the internet.
Yeah. It's funny to see like people's old email, like their old like Hotmails or Prodigy emails and shit like that, or
What do you
AOL.
mean old Hotmail? Some people still use an active Hotmail account.
And some people still drive cars from the 70s. Listen, my point is that like I remember like my first getting into the internet, my first way of connecting with the internet was through AOL, and I was a teenager. I think this is like '94. It was, gosh, I could always like relate my online presence to what was going on in wrestling at the time, and so it has to be between like '94 and '97 because I was all over like pro wrestling internet at the time, and at the time was Bret Hart leaving the WWE for WCW and the Montreal Screw Job, and that was fucking everywhere. So, so yeah, like '96, '97, but like I said, I remember getting online with my dad kind of like helping me with it. And the very first time I'm like in a chat room with somebody, I remember my dad sort of had this look. My dad's a really smart guy. He was in computers. He was at one point working on a master's degree in computer science. And I think he knew. He knew it was a very interesting moment. The moment I had my first chat room experience, he was looking over my shoulder and I could see it in his face. He didn't say it at the time, but I think he was thinking it. We've lost him. I got my first taste of the drug, and I never looked back. But yeah, I remember like my old screen names were like Dude Muda because it was the Dude Love, the Great Muda, again wrestling nerd. And then I think I was Markkind, which was Mankind, again my name plus Mick Foley's gimmick and all of that. In any case, my point being that avatars have been with us for a really really long time. First, it's that sort of thing, and then it's online gaming. And I remember I used to watch some documentaries about this. Is where I was going with it. And I remember there was a girl talking about the internet gives you anonymity and infinite creativity to be anything you want to be. Ready Player One dealt with this fictionally, I think, the best way. The idea of our life sucks, and this directly links to the Surrogates. Our life sucks. Real life sucks. It's hard. We don't like who we are. We don't like the way we look. We don't like the way we feel. We don't like interacting with the world. So here's this virtual space where everybody can look like whatever it is you want to be, whatever your wish fulfillment perception is. I want to be Kevin Nash, but not with the bad knees, or I want to be, a character from Final Fantasy, or I want to be Donkey Kong. You can be that now. And you can interact in this world as that thing, as the very thing you've always wanted to be. What an addicting drug that is. What an addictive idea of I can shed my skin and be this otherworldly entity, and I can feel good about myself finally. It is a wonderfully psychologically addictive drug. And that is, to me, the theme, and for me, the underlying attraction of Robert Venditti's The Surrogates. I love the idea of exploring this like psychological effect of like not liking yourself and wanting to be something else and having that ability to now interact in the world as something else. And this idea that he got this idea from another novel, and it's absolutely true. How much time we spend online being something that we're not in a space where we're happier that way than we are in real life, and the constant tug and pull of having to exist in the real world because it's actually healthier than this virtual fictional fantasy space. And the main character, it's really summed up really nicely in the book in the main character's interaction with his wife,
Oh yeah.
where he's like, "Can we just spend time together?" And she's like, "Great, let's go out, let's go do whatever." And he's like, "No, come out of
You
come out of
charge
your
up the bot.
yeah, no, come out of your surrogate. Like, I just want to spend time with you, the flesh and blood you." And her argument to him is, "Why would you want me to feel bad about myself? Why would you want me to exist in this space where I don't like who I am? I'm more comfortable this way. I engage with the world in a happier, more mindful place. Engage with me that way." And he's like, ick, no. No, thank you. I would like the real... It's so funny. I will shut up and let you speak. But
You're good.
I was thinking about this last night. I was at a friend's house, a female friend, my ex-girlfriend, and she stopped dyeing her hair. It's graying. Same thing with my current girlfriend. She has some like gray streaks in her hair. How much more I appreciate the gracefully aging look than the desperately hanging on to youth thing. And I bring that up because that's what this character is doing in the book.
Oh yeah.
The wife character, she's like, "I don't like who I am. I don't like what I'm becoming. I don't like aging." It's a major part of like the current pervasive mental illness of our culture is people desperately clinging to a sense of self that they've long since aged past. And it's the Peter Pan thing. And Bruce Willis is like, "But I like my old wife."
This about my Thor poster.
The shoe fits, Cinderella. Now, he says to her, like, "But I like you. I like that we're old. I like aging together. Like, why won't you kind of embrace our relationship as it is and not as this fiction you've created?" And she's like, "Who the fuck are you to tell me how to live?"
Well, I pulled one of those quotes out in the second issue. She says, "When I'm linked, I look younger, I feel younger, and if that's not reality, I don't know what is."
Yeah.
And it's easy to go, well, it's not real because it's not real. But if you're that immersed, if you're feeling what the surrogate is feeling, I mean, I think it talks about like you can smoke and get the feeling of the nicotine or whatever without any of the cancerous side effects, or you can do all this stuff, all the benefit, none of the risk. And obviously that's not the ideal thing all the time, but you can see how appealing that is. And that's been the subject of a lot of stories, is that's not true. Well, but what if it is? I mean, look at what's his name, Cypher in the Matrix. He's like, I know this isn't a steak, but sure tastes like a steak. So I'm good with it.
A natural course of human psychology reinforced through religious teaching is cause and effect, action, consequence. You remove the consequence from people's lives, you have the modern school system. You have modern spent too long on TikTok yesterday, speaking of avatars. You have wildly dysfunctional behavior. That's the reality of it. If you can constantly touch hot stoves and never get burned, why would you stop touching hot? Wouldn't you do anything? We've seen you know this because you are a consumer of stories and a teller of stories. You know that there are so many that deal in the idea of what if there are no consequences? What would people do? And they go crazy. They go absolutely fucking insane. And
Groundhog Day. What if there was no tomorrow? We could do anything we want.
Did you watch Legends of Tomorrow?
Yeah, parts of it. I made it through season 3.
Okay, this may have been then after you stopped watching it, but the character who plays one of the Egyptian superheroes, there's a scene where
more than one.
Moon Knight, V for Vendetta, Watchmen. So speaking of ticks, to get to this point and move this on, they do like every good science fiction series, they do a Groundhog's Day episode.
Oh no, I did see that one. Yeah.
Okay. And when she realizes that she's going to die at the end of every day unless she solves the puzzle, she just starts doing stupid shit like eating whipped cream. Just like playing a trombone, just jerking off through the whole thing until she finally.
Stupid about playing the trombone.
Huh?
Stupid about playing the trombone.
My point being, she isn't focused on the task. She is just reveling in um, in adolescent behavior, essentially. She's just idling the days away, trying to figure out what to do next. And that's what the Surrogates deals with.
Yeah, that's the only reason I do half the stuff I don't want to do, because I know it's going to be a problem if I don't.
Yeah, I go to work because if I don't, I can't pay for the bills, and if I can't pay for the bills, I can't live in the house. It's really that simple. It's funny. I've been complaining as of late about, like, why do I still continue to do all this? Why do I do podcasts or whatever? When I get much more satisfaction and immediate attention out of doing TikTok. And I had to take a breath and go, because I won't be socializing unless I do this. If I don't, this is kind of my social outlet now. Since I don't have a lot of socializing outside of this, and outside of what I do with my girlfriend. So hey, friend, this is my socializing time. It's not really a podcast. It's just me and a friend talking about a book we like.
Okay.
This combines two of my favorite things. It combines hard-boiled detective noir with science fiction. And I think that's why I love it so much. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of a murder mystery and your classic sci-fi stuff. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, it definitely presses all those buttons, and it's recognizable in each one, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I've seen this story before, and maybe it's just because it does it so well. I mean, I think this has been touched on in different stories, like you said, Ready Player One, things like that. But at no point was I reading this going, oh, here we go again. Internet's bad. Computer. No, I was all in on this.
I think because it takes a moderate tone with the subject matter. It does not. First of all, it doesn't really take a stance. It kind of presents two sides of an argument and lets the reader kind of sort through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also attends appropriately to the narrative. So this isn't just, you and I have, and Ronnie have two varying opinions on, not all robots, Billionaire Island. What's his name?
Mark
Russell.
Mark Russell?
Yeah. You, me and Ronnie probably have, like, with me being on one side, Ronnie being on the far other side, and you and Jesse kind of being in the middle on Mark Russell, to one degree or another, of his level of preachiness. Mark Russell is as subtle as John Singleton is as subtle as a kick to the face. And this handles the same degree of thematic intrigue with a lot more subtlety. A lot more, I like Mark Russell, and I think his ideas are grown up, but his presentation is adolescent. Whereas Robert Venditti, at least as far as the Surrogates go, is grown up in both thematic theme and presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think both the comic and the movie do come down on, hey, maybe not everything should be done with robots, but it's not like, oh, everybody who wants this is terrible. It's not, hit you over the head like, this is a bad idea. Why would anybody want it? They explain why it happened and how, and you can relate to almost everybody in it.
Yeah, it's not condescending. Mark Russell, I like him, but I also like Bill Maher, and they have one thing in common. They're both condescending. This doesn't feel condescending.
No, not at all.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we shift over to the movie. One of the things I like about this book also is how it handles the opposing point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So you have as a point of a hurdle, something for our characters to deal with, is a sect of humanity led by, I can't remember what the character's name is, but he's
the Prophet is what he goes by.
Yeah, is this group going, hey, we've lost sight of our humanity here. We've given up our humanity in this Faustian bargain, for self-confidence and all of the great benefits of surrogacy. We've traded away our humanity. We've traded away our connection to each other. Which, if that is not a profound and prescient commentary on the very now we're living in, I don't know what is.
Oh yeah.
But he's saying like we so these are the back to the cave people. So
Mhm.
it's like there's this level of thing in everything that we're doing. The banks are destroying the world. We should go back to like trading and bartering. The environment, the global warming is cooking us all. We should go back to living in caves, and this just goes on and on. They are the extreme, the other side, and I like the way Robert Venditti sort of presented them as we reject the surrogate life, we reject robots. This is a robot-free zone, and just leave us alone. This is kind of like the mutants on Genosha. Just leave us alone to live our lives separate from the rest of you. We accept the fact that we can't change the rest of the world, but we'd like to live in a place of isolation, and we demand the right to do so. And it's introduced, one, because this book needs an opposing point of view, but two, to give the lead detective a place to go to talk to people to solve the crime.
Mhm.
But I like the way Robert Venditti presented it, and I'll give you the last word on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I thought that they did a pretty good job with that. Heck, I was even impressed that the prophet seemed to be quoting scripture accurately until we get to issue 4 and he starts comparing himself to Jesus. I'm like, hey, okay, dude, come on. You have a
Why did that bother you, Evan?
because he's not Jesus.
Oh,
I mean, the Bible says, Jesus was God himself and didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. So, who are we to set ourselves up that high?
nicely said. Anyway, I
But
interrupted you.
no, that was it. But yeah, no, I liked it, and it also reflects things that I see today, even not with the technological questions. With okay, I see where the dreads, they were called. I see where they're coming from, and yet their leader and some of them are kind of shady too. And it's like, okay, well, I want to agree with you, but I don't really like the way you go about things.
We could spend hours. I could spend hours talking about the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the evils and goods of, for lack of a better phrase, avatar technology, online technology. I've often joked that the day I can upload my consciousness into a robot body, I will leave this saggy fat bag of flesh behind so fast.
But Bruce Willis would miss you, Mark.
Sure. So, but that is as much as I could talk about this for hours, and I have a TikTok for that sort of thing. So I will leave the discussion of the book there. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss with the book?
The only thing I wanted to touch on, I did think it was interesting, as much as this isn't a superhero type book, that
Mhm.
I don't know if he just decided this was the best way to do it, or did it to try to appeal to some of the more mainstream comic book readers. But the villain in this, he gets the name Steeplejack. He's a super villain for
Mhm.
all intents and purposes, and they didn't do anything with that in the movie. And then I remember, because I remembered almost nothing about the movie, even though I had seen it a long time ago. But I thought it was interesting in the third issue when they try to catch Steeplejack, and he like is swinging over a helicopter and loses an arm
Mhm.
and just keeps going. And I'm like, I thought this guy was anti-surrogate, but here he is using the surrogate technology, which is an interesting thing. Like the people who proclaim their appreciation of the sanctity of life by blowing up abortion clinics. Wait, what? That's not that's not how that works, guys.
That's really
So
funny, actually.
I thought that was interesting. Maybe I should have seen that coming, but I thought that was the guy who is, and there was a good reason for him to be using a surrogate, but the guy who is the most radically anti-surrogate person out there, he's not on the Dread Reservation keeping to himself and expressing his beliefs. He's trying to shut the whole thing down, and he's using a surrogate to do it.
Well, it's so funny because there's always that one guy, right? There's the group of people that are just like, let us live in peace. There's everybody else willing to run with the new technology, the new toys, the jingling keys, and they kind of agree to a separate but equal existence. Then there's always that one guy that's not willing to live with the peace. There's always, but but he's always a hypocrite. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the idea of this thing that I'm against, it will be the very thing I will use to. And sometimes it's as a form of gaslighting and manipulation. Like we want to make this look bad, so I'm using it to make it look bad, so I can turn public tide against it. And sometimes it's just I see the usefulness of it and I'll use it, but I'll use it to destroy it. It's the old CM Punk thing of you can't fight from the outside, you have to fight from within. That idea. So I didn't question it. I thought like this makes sense to me. This all tracks. What do you think of the artwork? Just as a quick aside.
I actually meant to ask you that because I know what a big fan of Sam Keith you are. It's artwork that I would not be my choice. Like if I'm reading the Avengers or certain things, and it's not even like if I was an editor putting this together, I wouldn't be like, hey, we need some kind of like surreal painted stuff that isn't cartoony, but definitely isn't hyper realistic. That's what we need to tell this story. I'm not a very good art critic, but I can say that it worked. It worked with the mood and the tone and everything. Even though if somebody gave me the script of this and who do you think we should get to draw this? How should it look? I would never have picked that.
I tend to like art the same way that I like storytelling. I like linear storytelling and I like clean art, because the most important thing for me is to understand what it is I'm reading and seeing and watching. Seeing and watching, two different things. But I moderate that with my understanding of style. And sometimes I have to sacrifice a little bit of coherency for style. And I think this sort of scratchy art style is better than Sam Keith, but also works well for this book. I think had it been clean and pristine artwork and it was overly coherent, it would have taken away from the noir aspect of the book, because this kind of gave me some like Batman vibes. Like there are some Batman books where the art is very scratchy.
Rough, I guess, is the term I would have used in both the appearance and the feel it gives you. It really suits the tone very well, and it's not a realistic art style, but it makes it feel a little more real. I guess I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but I don't know. It feels kind of imperfect and human.
Well, this will be a great transition point into talking about the movie. If you look at a lot of the hard-boiled detective noir movies, their aesthetic is very stylized. They are not shot in a hyper-realistic way. There's Dutch angles being used. There's filters being applied. There's,
Wasn't he a wrestler, Dutch angle?
I hate you.
So glad I can fulfill your socializing needs.
Sure. But no, I think about like a Sunset Boulevard. The story is told from the point of view of a dead guy laying in a puddle, that kind of a thing. I think about like Chinatown. The forthcoming Spider Noir is done in black and white. So for you kids out there. So this is the idea that we're using art to create an aesthetic that lends itself to a hard-boiled detective noir. Seems more natural to me than if you had just done it clean and plain and like, then you're forced to hyper focus on the story, which wouldn't be a bad one because this isn't a bad story. Also, not a particularly inventive or new story, which is fine when you have the tree itself doesn't have to be the healthiest when you've decorated up with tinsel and baubles and lights and whatnot, and you've really made the thing pretty. However, if you're not doing that, then the tree has to be the prettiest thing, and then what kind of story are we telling? These are all Christmas trees analogies, by the
way. I got that. I did.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure if you were with me or not.
No. I'm there. Yeah, and you're right. There's nothing about this story that I'm like, oh, I have never thought of this before. No one has ever thought to look at the world this way, but not a lot of people have done it this well.
That is a very true statement. All right. Unless you have any major objections, let's move on to the movie. Surrogates is a 2009 American science fiction action film obviously based on the book. It is directed by Jonathan Mostow. If you don't know who Jonathan Mostow is, well, you should. He, in 2017, directed The Hunter's Prayer. He produced Playing for Keeps. He has a story credit for The House at the End of the Street in 2012. Prior to this, he was the director for Terminator 3: Rise of the Machine. He wrote and directed U-571 in 2000. And then he wrote and directed Breakdown in 1997. He also worked on Beverly Hills Body Snatchers, and he directed the segment Fright Dr. Doberman in the movie Fright Show. On television, he directed an episode of Accused, The Last Ship, and From Earth to the Moon. So that's this person. It stars Bruce Willis as Tom Greer, an FBI agent who ventures out into the real world to investigate murder of surrogates. It, like I said before, it stars Radha Mitchell, Rosamund Pike, Boris Karloff, James Cromwell, and Ving Rhames. The film's main concept centers on the mysterious murder of a college student linked to the man who helped create a high-tech surrogate phenomenon that allows people to purchase remote-controlled humanoid robots through which they interact with society. These fit, attractive, remote-controlled robots ultimately assume their life roles, enabling people to experience life vicariously from the comfort and safety of their own homes. Surrogate was released September 25th, 2009. It received mixed reviews and grossed over $122 million on an $80 million budget. So if you're doing quick movie mental math, it was not tremendously profitable. It received 37% on Rotten Tomatoes as of this writing. We can get back to some of this a little bit later if you want. But I watched this last night, and I think it does a fair job of adapting the book. I didn't see, like, we've done some stuff where, it was, an adaptation of the book in name only. Like, they're so wildly different. The plot is more or less the same. There's a murder. He's investigating the murder. There's a prophet.
People actually die. The operators actually die. That was one thing I totally missed talking about in the book. Some of the details where the first surrogate that's destroyed, they go to the operator, and the guy's like, "Oh man, I just bought it. Well, won't your insurance cover it? Or don't you have an old model?" "No, I had to sell it to get it." And it was just like all this realistic stuff. Like, even if I've thought about this stuff, I've never gone, I wonder what insurance would be like if I had my own personal robot. And it's just I
this
have
whole to imagine it's like car insurance.
Yeah, but it's just this whole lived in world. And so yeah, that was one of the main things I noticed was the operators actually die when they mess up the surrogates in this.
I think it does a fair job of adapting the book, though. I would say the second half of it, I think once Bruce Willis loses his avatar, his robot, and he has to interact in the world, like I think it was after he went to go see Ving Rhames, I started to lose when it became more focused on the action elements of it and less on the science fiction elements of it. I kind of lost interest in the movie. So it's like the whole back half where it's more action oriented, I was struggling with this movie. Not that it's bad or anything. It was also late at night, and I was like, like half dozing off. I was half dozing off. I was half paying attention to my bets on the WNBA, which always bet the under. These women suck. So, anywho. They were off by the most, like, over, you could bet the line by a good 40 points in like 2 of the 3 games. It was great. I've never won such easy money. Anyway, moving on from my betting habits. So what did you think of the movie?
It hit a lot of the same notes. Honestly, I think it's an example. We were talking about, this isn't the first time the story's been tackled, but the comic did it so well. I think this is an example of maybe not handling the same material as well. The movie, I said I was so impressed with how they built the world in the comic. This movie, as the opening credits roll, you hear the beep, beep, beep of the dump truck backing up to deliver all the exposition to you immediately.
See, I disagree. I don't
Okay.
disagree with your statement. I think it absolutely front loads the movie with exposition, but I think because it's doing it over the credits and it's doing it in a newsreel format,
Okay.
interspersed with 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now, I got everything I needed to know about the world going into this. Like, everything was signaled for me enough at the very beginning of it that when the movie starts and we start to see these people, I at least understand the world that they're in, so they have a good foundation in which to build on. Like,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I think what I was trying to say before is I actually liked the first half of this movie, when it was more about the book does a really good job of balancing hard-boiled detective noir with the science fiction elements and themes. The movie does a less good job of that, and I kind of wished the movie was about the first half of it and not the second half of it. The
Mhm.
second half just feels like the same old average B-level science fiction story action movie. The first
Mhm.
half felt like good old-fashioned, interesting science fiction.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I guess the exposition dump wasn't as bad. But since I had just like gone on, like my notes each issue was like, oh man, they just keep building this world out. I love the way they're doing this.
Mhm.
So it didn't look as good in comparison to that. Maybe I thought the part where the way he loses his surrogate in this was like a really cool action sequence, but also is maybe where it started to lose some of what was working. I mean, it was there's one or two cool sequences in the comic, but it's more about the story. And this was like, this is really neat, but that's not why I'm watching the story. It's like I don't need a robot that can do super jumps.
This feels noted to death. I know, like, you're not like the movie guy. That's me. But this
I
feels
was.
like, well, no, I mean in the sense of I tend to pay attention to like development history or
Mhm.
development trends,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean by like I'm the movie guy, because I'm thinking about this not just from a critic standpoint or a fan standpoint, but also from an executive standpoint. And this, maybe it's projection. I'm not, I don't I don't have superpowers. I don't know this for certain. This is just a feeling, and my feeling was this was noted to death. Like they're watching dailies and sending dailies back to executive producers, and they're going, "The fuck are you people? What is this, Star Trek: The Motion Picture? Speed this up! Let's get some
Do
more
some Die
action."
Hard stuff.
Yeah, like, don't you have the guy from Die Hard in this? Like, come on, man. This isn't 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is an action movie.
Mhm.
Let's go. And everyone working on this movie going, I hate Hollywood. you know, they gave
Yeah.
me $80 million to make this movie. I have to make my bosses happy. So here's a random action sequence.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good action sequence. It just
hmm
given what I'd read and what they could have done here. You're right. It eventually just started feeling like a standard science fiction movie, where
Yeah.
like, hey, we had this cool concept, now we're actioning it up. And I like action. Don't get me wrong, but it felt kind of out of place here.
I did a review on Thursday with Mick. We were talking about The Parenting, and the Parenting is a comedy horror movie. And I said everything that's good about this movie is all the relationship family stuff. Everything I didn't like about this movie or didn't move me in any way, shape, or form is all the horror stuff. And nobody is watching this for the things that I liked.
Yeah. Well, it's
I could say the same thing about Surrogates.
Yeah.
Everything that's good about this movie is the relationship between Bruce Willis and his partner, and more to the point, Bruce Willis and his wife, Rosamund Pike. And
Yeah.
everything that I don't like about this movie is all the stuff everyone else is going to watch this movie for, which is the dumb action stuff.
Well, and I feel like I think this was. I should have gone back and watched the trailer. I think the trailer even centered around spoiler alert, the ending where the surrogates get shut down. Like I feel like I saw that before I saw the movie, like everybody dropping,
Right.
and I almost feel like they were like, somebody was like, okay, it's all building to this. We've got to get to this moment. This is going to be the one that people remember, and it is literally the only thing I remembered about the movie until I watched it again. But the way they get to the surrogate shutdown in this feels really forced, whereas it just made total sense in the course of the book. Like I wasn't I wasn't questioning anything. Like I went back and looked at it. I think in the book the Dreads were marching and the surrogate police force was getting ready to open fire, and so that's one of the reasons they shut them down. Whereas in this, the guy's going to do his thing to fry all the surrogates and it'll kill all the users, but that's okay because then the people who survive, it'll all be better. And then they use the technician's computer program, Chekhov's computer program from earlier in the movie to prevent all the feedback. But then Bruce Willis is like, but hey, I could shut down all these surrogates. And yeah, that's where we've been led to see that surrogacy is bad. But like, and I know you're not supposed to think about these things, especially in an action movie, but I'm like, how many people got like legitimately hurt in that, or how many people reacted like Greer's wife does in the comic, where without her surrogate she kills herself,
right?
But Bruce Willis is like, nah, I'm Bruce Willis, I got this, I'm going to make the decision for all of humanity.
I think that's a brilliant point. It's an absolute weakness of the film is you're never given a clear argument as to why for the greater good surrogacy has to disappear. We have to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
If the surrogates were like infected in some way to where it's killing by no other force of nature, it's killing the users, but by virtue of its interaction with the users, the world is becoming like it's affecting the outside world. Like there's no ticking clock, there's no time bomb, there's no greater threat. There's just one man having an epiphany, and he decides for the rest of us what good is.
And he wants his wife to come out of her room.
Yeah, that's not a good enough reason to disrupt everybody else's life.
It's like, the internet has a lot of terrible things, but look, we're socializing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it'd be like, could you imagine if somebody like wakes up one day and be like, if the internet has ruined schools, it's ruined marriages, it's ruined dating, it's ruined food, it's ruined everything, and then like goes, just starts going around to different servers and blowing them all up. Not that I'm giving anyone any ideas.
Yeah.
And it's like, who the fuck are you to decide that was good? That was good for everybody. And I think that actually speaks to a problem between Hollywood and the rest of the world, of people in Hollywood thinking they know what's best for the rest of us, and not to be that guy, but there's a lot of that, and it comes out in films because they use films to promote agendas and their beliefs, and there's nobody. We were just talking about The West Wing, and Andrew brought this line up, and it's a great line. He was like, if we don't have wildly oppositional points of view on the court, there's nobody there to write the opposing view. So if you have a guy who's like, I have a bee in my bonnet and I want to tell this story from this point of view because I believe in this idea and I think it's the best thing for the rest of us, there's nobody there to challenge them and going, who the fuck are you to say that? And have you thought about this part of it? And what good is coming? The movie is unbalanced, and I think that might be my issue with it above all else, is that it makes up for that lack of balance by overloading it then with traditional action stuff, and traditional action stuff is fucking boring. So...
Well, yeah, the movie is more in line with some other stuff we've talked about, where it's a great idea that the execution isn't quite there. The comic... It's a great idea and it's executed. I don't want to say perfectly, but it's executed very, very well. So you feel stuff reading the comic, and in the movie you're like, okay, and now this happened. So
I said all of that, and I'm just reacting to what I saw, what I remember in our conversation as things are, as synapses are firing in my brain. So I want to see if, and I'm going to read this cold, and I'm curious to see if the critical response matches the conversation that we're talking about. So take my hand. Let's walk over the critical bridge. Shall we, Evan?
I extended my hand toward the camera, podcast audience.
Fantastic. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Though it sports a slick look and feel, Surrogates fails to capitalize on a promising premise, relying instead on mindless action and poor scripts. Ding, ding, ding! Score 1 for the good guys. IGN gave the film a 6 out of 10, saying it provides a completely made, relatively predictable, and slickly presented piece of genre entertainment, offering just the right amount of action beats and futuristic visuals to keep the viewer engaged without ever having an actual thought. It's good escapist fun. C+. Lisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly concluded her positive review saying, "There's fun robot stuff, some good philosophical ideas, and a brief nutty Willis Ving Rams reunion 15 years after Pulp Fiction." Robert Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, writing, "While more ambitious than it has to be, ouch." Oh boy, you're so pretty. Don't talk. The film descends into action scenes too quickly. All right, I don't need to read more of this. I have been appropriately validated and jerked off. I'm good. How do you feel, Evan?
Appropriately validated.
Fantastic. I enjoy podcasting with you ever so much. All right. So I asked Fancy to do the plot synopsis here. I used 1 out of 2. But I said key differences. I asked it to compare and contrast the comic from the movie, and I kind of want to do this, and then we'll start to close up. So key differences from the comic to the movie. Main character, first the graphic novel, then the movie, so I don't have to keep repeating myself. Harvey Greer, methodical, reflective cop. Movie adaptation, Tom Greer, action-driven FBI agent played by Bruce Willis. Ding, 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 ding.
You can't have an action-driven FBI agent named Harvey. It just can't be done.
Unless he's Harvey the Wonder Hamster. Harvey the Wonder Hamster. Yes.
He doesn't bite, and he does. Oh, we weren't doing the whole thing?
I don't remember the whole thing. If you would like to sing the whole thing, I will stop the podcast and put you center screen to do so.
Well, I don't know. Would we get flagged on YouTube for that?
Not if you're singing it, no. If I play the music video, yes.
The moment's passed. Continue with your fancy comparison.
Thank you. Tone, slow burn, philosophical noir-style investigation. Fast-paced, action-heavy sci-fi thriller. Hey, Evan, it seems like we know what we're talking about.
Hey, first time for everything.
Setting, more socially grounded, subtle dystopia. Glossy, high-tech urban world. Antagonist, Steeplejack, a radical anti-surrogate terrorist. In the movie, a combination of the Prophet and corporate corruption. Ugh. So tired of Hollywood. Hollywood, the corporate entity, being tired of corporations. Themes.
It's kind of like an anti-surrogate activist using a surrogate, isn't it?
Indeed, Evan, indeed. Themes, identity, disconnection, anti-technology, corporate control. Control versus freedom, human vulnerability, action movie, moral dilemmas. Ending, Greer chooses to stop using his surrogate and live authentically. In the comic, man makes individual choice. In the movie, Greer shuts down all surrogates globally, forcing humanity to reconnect. Man makes decision for everyone. Hey, Hollywood, these are for you, McNulty. Surrogate role. Commentary on privilege, body image, race, and class. Movie. Simplified as escapism and detachment. Steeplejack's identity. Complex, philosophical, connected to Greer's arc. Merged and simplified for plot efficiency. Well, Evan, this has been fun. Any final words regarding the Surrogates? The movie, the book, the flamethrower?
No, I really enjoyed the comic, and I mean the movie. It's about what like I said, I didn't remember many details, but I remembered. It's a good idea. Could have been done better, but I mean, not. I've watched worse. We've watched worse.
I think because you have so much more freedom on television than you do as a movie in movie theaters, I think this would have worked better as a miniseries.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I totally forgot when you threw it to me. I was, not everything has to be remade and expanded, but this could be a limited series, or this could be a multi-season series. I mean, there's stuff that the comic just barely scratched the surface of. kind of curious to see the prequel, but honestly, I wanted to see what happened next, especially because the comic didn't totally eliminate surrogates. It just shut down a lot of surrogates in Atlanta.
I think if you use this as kind of like why the last man kind of a thing, where it's like, this is a great idea that we're going to do our own thing with, and then you kind of wrote the TV series out from that. Let's take a few seasons and build up to the great deconnecting, and then life after deconnection and what that's like. I hate to kick the dead gross maggot filled horse that is Marvel Cinematic Universe, but there was so much meat on the bone to talk about life after the snap.
Oh yeah,
and they didn't. And
we just got a couple of sides.
Yeah, well, I mean, even like life after the snap picks up after the snap after Endgame. Eternals happens after Endgame. Shang-Chi happens after Endgame. All the series happen after Endgame, after everyone's already back. So the only thing that ever really touched on it was Falcon and Winter Soldier, and it's still after Endgame.
They had 2 intense minutes in WandaVision.
Yeah, my point is, like, they talk about what life was like after the snap, like how people dealt with it, but it's always like, it's always to sort of create context for what's happening in the now. Yeah. But I think like that period of having to suddenly, again, and I'm thinking about the potential of Why the Last Man, there was so much you could have discussed about the sudden absence of half the people in the world and how that impacts things you don't even think about. It's funny. As just a final comment on this, and I'll let you have the last word and then I really are done. I mentioned to somebody who didn't know about this, the concept behind Why the Last Man. And I said, it's a really great idea. It's what if all the men suddenly disappeared? They all die, right? In a virus or some shit. Mm-hmm. And all that's left in the world is women. And I said, one of the things that the book deals with is the kinds of careers and jobs that only or mostly men do, and the kind of knowledge bases that only or mostly men have. So suddenly power plants don't work. And I was saying it to a woman, and the woman's natural, I don't remember which woman I was talking to, but the woman's actual reaction was, hey, what the fuck? And might have been my daughter. And I was like, I'm sorry, let's get a tally of all the engineers in the world. How many of them are women? And how many of them work at power plants? The concept of lost knowledge. And that is just an underdeveloped, I think an underexplored idea of what happens when you have an event that causes an expansive loss of knowledge. I was thinking about the end of Surrogates, the movie, and I didn't say it before, and I kind of missed the opportunity, so I'm going to say it now. The end of, I think it's Escape from L.A., another science fiction dystopia movie from a million years ago that ends the same way. There's an event, and suddenly everything stops working. In this case, it's an EMP, and it all the technology in the world just stops working instantaneously. We're back to the Stone Age, and that's where the movie ends, and and it's left with, well, what do we do now? A lot of the Mad Max stories post the first Mad Max movie is, what do you do in a world in which oil is scarce and people need to get around and you can't find food? Like, what do you do? These are all like great settings and ideas for storytelling, and I don't know, and I feel like we run away from that kind of stuff to tell other kinds of stories that kind of tangentially touch on it, but don't deal with it directly. And I don't know, it's a frustration.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that could be explored. I didn't realize right before you said it, I read something that what I thought of as the second volume was a prequel, and I'm like, I want to know what happens next.
Right.
I mean, yeah. I know not everything needs a sequel, not everything has to be a franchise, but there's so much you could do with this. The in the comic, one of the additional sections was just like classified ads in a newspaper. That's right, folks. Newspapers will still be around in 2054. Robert Venditti says so. But there's just so much with the different classified ads, like people selling used surrogates or surrogate escort services, and just all kinds of stuff that's like, okay, I wouldn't have thought of this, but I mean, half of those classified ads probably could have been an issue or a short story or something,
So just as a way of getting out of this conversation, instead of like cutting it off directly, I want to tell two different anecdotes and get your response to them. One was, and I meant to say this before, like when we were talking about the comic book, there's a really interesting TikToker that I follow. She does a lot of like, women, if you would like to have better relationship with guys, do this kind of content. And not all of it is against women. Some of it's against guys. But she put out a TikTok, and it made me reflective of my own behavior. She was like, so I took a break from social media for like a week, and my whole perspective on dating changed because I had to go out and talk to people. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not as bad as it's portrayed on social media. And then she was like, and then I stopped, and my favorite part of her TikTok was when I stopped scrolling at night and read a book, I actually fell asleep, but I wasn't up all night. She was like, when I got off of social media, my entire life and perspective changed. And I said, that's an important thing to remember, and definitely something you can take away from the Surrogates book is all of these advancements in technology, in socializing and interacting with the world are great and are useful and are not to be entirely dependent on. Again, let's not give ourselves entirely to heroin use. I'm making a
bold stance.
I'm making a parallel.
Okay.
But the other one was, and this is true life. My during one of the hurricanes or post-hurricane, the last one, as a matter of fact, that really left a lot of wreckage in the Tampa Bay area. My girlfriend at the time, she spent entirely too much time online in this social dancing game that she was doing. Like she creates an avatar, and the avatar can go into different rooms and dance and socialize. And that was her life. That was her way of socializing outside of the stuff that, we were doing together as a couple. And because we had electricity, but we did not have internet, she couldn't play her game for a couple of days. And she was going crazy. Like, she was so bored. She, and so angry and so depressed over not being able to have that level of social interaction that she was becoming rather difficult to live with. Then there's me, who was so happy to have quiet. I had just lived in the jail for 4 days. I was happy to not socialize with people. But I also went and drove my car to get gas, which was, a Mad Max exercise in itself. And I drove her car to get gas. And I went for walks around the block, and, or I just kind of laid down and looked at the ceiling and kind of enjoyed the quiet. And therein lies the difference between people and, those of us who are a little too dependent on internet social interaction and those of us who are not. So sort of throw that out there. Evan, I'm going to give you the total last word here. Anything else you want to say about any of the various topics we brought up or the subjects that we've been reviewing?
No, you probably should have had the last word. I think I got all mine in.
Fantastic. All
Sorry
right.
about that.
No.
I need to make notes. Last word.
You know what? Everyone's like, I always want to give people the last word because I don't want to feel like I took over the whole podcast. And sometimes people are just like, I really don't, but he threw it to me, so fuck, I gotta come up with something to say. You really don't. You could just say no.
No.
So, fantastic. All right. So on June 21st, we're gonna look at a movie that just came out last year. As a matter of fact, I saw it on a date. Come to think of it, it's called Here, and it's based on the book Here. That is a actual, I don't think it's an actual comic. I think it's like an actual book with pictures.
I was told it was a comic. If the words aren't in balloons, I'm out.
Maybe not. We'll figure it out though. But we're gonna do Here on the next comic strip, and essentially, the idea is it's this one room over the course of a variety of different years, and what is going on in this one room. It's a very stylized and kind of gimmick-driven book, and the movie is even worse. So that's what we're going to talk about next on.
All right.
on June 21st. What do you think about that?
Well, with that kind of buildup, I don't know if I can wait till June 21st.
Hot diggity. All right. First, the plugs that pay me. This past week, we did a Metal Hammer of Doom jukebox. We looked at Crowbot, and Mick talked about her OnlyFans. It was fantastic. On Monday, Mick was back, but not talking about her OnlyFans. Instead, we talked about Final Destination Bloodlines. We were joined by, speaking of books, Zachary Strobel on Damn You Hollywood. Alexis had David Wright and Andrew Roscoe on to talk about Andor Season 2, which apparently is fantastic and wildly better than anything else they've done in Star Wars for years now. Myself and Alexis
The Last Jedi.
Yeah, myself and Alexis Hana had a great conversation about the miniseries on Netflix, Apple Cider Vinegar. Mick joined me again. It was just she and I, and we talked the parenting, Control Freak, and Holland. Tomorrow, I Love You Tomorrow. Myself, Jesse, possibly Mick. She said yes, then she said no, and then she said definitely maybe. We'll be talking about Pump Up the Volume, SFW, and SLC Punk. I know you like the swear words, Evan Bevins. I know you.
Darn right.
Yeah, I know you like the salty language. You should definitely check out those 3 movies to get your fill of filthy mouth.
But I've just had this lovely conversation with you.
Monday, myself and Robert will be talking Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. Tuesday, Alexis will have my children, Jonas and Lily, on to do an on-trial Civil Court edition. Oh, yeah. They'll be talking Lilo and Stitch, comparing the 2002 animated feature to the live-action 2025. So that ought to be a nightmare. Speaking of nightmares, this Thursday, Sean Comer is back. And we will be talking the Karate Kid trilogy. No, we're not doing the 4th one. Nobody wants to talk about that. But we will be talking about the Ralph Macchio.
I thought it was pretty swank.
And then that's that. All right, you saucy fellow. Tell them where they can find you and your wares.
Well, you can go to asterisk51.blogspot.com. A lot of comics, a few movies, especially the ones that I found at Dollar Tree. Where else are you going to find in-depth discussions of Chinese-speaking vampires and High Moon, the Western werewolf mashup?
Terrific.
You can also join me reading through the amalgam titles when DC and Marvel mushed their characters together. Just imagine Stan Lee creating the DC universe, and the comic so obscure, even rabid collector young Mark Radulich probably didn't have an issue of it. Secret Defenders.
That is correct, sir. So I was just looking. Here is actually a comic book, and I know that because I went to one of the comic book reading sites, and it is listed as a graphic novel. So there.
Okay, well, there you go.
There you go. Alrighty. With that said, thank you, Evan. Always a pleasure. For Evan Bevins, I have to eat my Taco Bell now. Be well, be safe, and behave.